Hi, folks. It's Dr. Spears with drpremed.com. I want to talk to you today about a tale of two premeds. So, before we get started, I want to share a little background story about growing up and driving. And we're going to just step back in time to a time before we had all these GPS systems. And you know how we figured out how to get around? We had maps, but then there was something called MapQuest. So what you would do is you would actually log into your computer, print out your starting location and then your ending location, put that into the system, and then it would give you like step by step, turn by turn directions. And so you would have that and you would print that out so you could have that while you're driving to figure out where you're going. And that was obviously to help you reach your final destination without getting lost. And for some of you guys, that's way before your time, and that just seems totally crazy and like unheard of that you would do that. And I know growing up in particular, my mom was concerned about that. She didn't want to get lost or anything like that because then as the technology improved, it was, oh, you can just use this on your phone. But my mom was concerned that, oh, what if we would be in an area where we didn't have cell phone reception, or like the internet would just basically drop on you and then you would be stuck without knowing where you need to go because the internet was slow and it was maybe taking time to refresh, and you're obviously, if you're driving, you don't really have time to figure out how the internet's going to work to get you where you need to be. And so that could be a problem. And so she would actually take the route of not only just printing them out, but sometimes she would have a notebook and would physically write out the directions step by step, because that was comforting to her, where she knew no matter what on this trip or journey that she would have this backup of plans to help her successfully navigate step by step to where she wanted to be to get to that location. And that's kind of what happens with you guys and applying to medical school. And one of the services I offer with my pre-med coaching service, you can have basically Dr. Spears as your well, I won't say MapQuest because we're beyond that now. Whatever modern day, I like Google Maps. I think there's like the Apple Map, and then there's Waze as well. So you have all these different technologies that basically are GPS to help you reach your destination, and even the more modern ones that even do crowd surfing and can give you updates like, oh, there's traffic alert, or you want to go this way, or even if you have a lead foot, they'll be like, oh, there's a speed trap ahead, so you need to watch out for that. And so with you guys applying to medical school, you guys don't want to go through this process using MapQuest, or even some people like, you know what? I'll just get in the car and figure it out on my own. I'm not even going to use a GPS. I'm not going to use a MapQuest. And that's just not the situation you want to be in. And I'll tell you a story about that. I work with a lot of students each year. And in one case, there was a student named Jason. Yep, it's not me, different Jason. This is an undergrad student. He was at UCLA for undergrad, had decent GPA. I think he needed to take the MCAT still before he was going to think about working with me. I probably got in a call or email with him, went back and forth, and was like, yeah, I can definitely help you out. I see some things that you can work on to really maximize your chances for getting into medical school and everything like that. However, this Jason decided, you know what, Dr. Spears is great. I like all this advice, but I have some. Oh, he had relatives who were physicians, like aunts, uncles, and cousins. He's like, oh, I'll just use them. They'll be the ones that can guide me through this process of getting into medical school. I said, okay, good luck, best to you on anything and everything like that. And so, like, no hard feelings, whatever. So he went through this process of applying to medical school, filling out his AMCAS, his secondaries, all of that good stuff, and hoping for interviews. And so then, so he did this all throughout the summer, and then in the fall, and then I got an email out of the blue from Jason saying, Dr. Spears, it's January. I put through all my applications. I haven't heard back from any medical schools. I'm very worried and concerned. What should I do? And so I gave him some advice on what he should do at this point in the process of applying to medical school. And Jason, he, all intents and purposes, he seemed like a well put together candidate for medical school, but he decided that he wanted to go his own route. And I'll come back, we'll swing it back to that. I'll tell you what happened to him ultimately with applying to medical school. Then there was another student I worked with. Her name was Victoria. This was a different application cycle or whatever. She was from California as well. I'm not sure which undergrad school she attended in California and everything like that. And she wanted help. This was probably in the spring of the year that she was applying to medical school. She reached out for my coaching services. I said, "Yeah, I can help you. You have a decent GPA, MCAT score. There's definitely things I can help you out with." So I signs up for my services, makes payment, all of that. Everything goes through, not a problem with that. She's very easy to work with. And as we get started, I like ask questions and everything like that. Find out she has a red flag in her background that's going to be a huge concern for getting to medical school. The reason was she was actually suspended from school for cheating. And so that's a huge red flag. You guys know about like integrity, being a physician, being held to different standards from the rest of society. So, like, okay, this is going to be a lot of work. We're going to need to figure out how we can spin this. And had to ask her a lot of questions. What happened? She was suspended for, I think, at least one full semester, maybe a full year, where she was basically kicked out of school because of her um, academic dishonesty that she had and everything like that. So I'm like, okay, now we have an uphill battle to get you in medical school, because med schools are going to look at this and they're not going to take kindly to this, and they're going to think about, we have all these other students who didn't cheat, didn't have any academic dishonesty. Why should we accept this applicant over all of those other applicants? So me being with me and what I do, I said, okay, we need to spin this negative into a positive and really talk about what you learned in the situation, the changes that you made, and had being out of school for a year, how you were impacted and affected by that, and things that you did in this process, and the resolve that you have to be a physician and everything like that, and that you're not going to let this one thing hold you back. Obviously, you know, it's significant, it's something that should never happen, but you learned from it and now you're moving forward with that. And so then Victoria was able to do what she needed to do in this process, and she got she made it. She got her application in on time. She actually got secondaries were received, although some schools automatically send out secondaries for getting into medical school. And then I'm going to jump back and we'll talk about what happened with Jason then. So again, it was January, and I tell students, if it's January and you applied early or on time to medical school, that's a good 4 or 5 months that medical schools have your application to decide what they're going to do with it. And it doesn't bode well for your candidacy of getting into medical school if it's January and you haven't gotten any interview invites or offers. I just told them that it's really not looking good, and I'll even reach out to some of the medical schools, and they were in agreement that no, once it's this late in a process and you haven't gotten in anywhere, it's most likely not going to happen. And students think, oh, I'll just apply to more schools and things like that if they're borderline applicant or things like that. But generally, if there's a flaw in your application, it's going to be flawed no matter where you apply to. And that's what happened with Jason, where unfortunately he was unable to get into medical school. For all intents and purposes, he might have had the grades, he had the MCAT score, but then he decided to do this process alone, or trusting family members and relatives who don't spend all their time working and helping students get into medical school, because a lot of times they think, oh, well, this process worked for myself, so I think I can then go and advise other students on how to get into medical school, or even a family member. And that really doesn't work, because I worked with one student, and both of their parents are physicians, and they said, wow, Dr. Spears, this is This admissions process is really competitive, and a lot has changed from when I and my wife were applying to medical school. In that process, what the father told me, and I'm like, "Yep, there's a lot has changed." And he's like, "I'm just so glad that we're going to work with you, and you're an expert, and you can really guide our children through this process to help them successfully get into medical school." And they were able to do that, and they were just really happy that I'm very hands-on with them, answering all questions, giving feedback, a lot of insight, and helping them work through this process of being a pre-med and ultimately getting into medical school. So I'm able to do that for students. It's just one thing, like you guys can't just think, oh, well, I know somebody who's in medical school or somebody who's a physician. I can just trust them. And you got to think about, do they have, yes, they might have your best interest at heart, but do they know the ins and outs of what's currently happening with applying to medical school? Because even with me, when I was applying to medical school, a lot has changed. When I was in that process, it was one of the deans, he told everybody, like, this was when I was in grad school, he told everybody that for medical school at that time, it was if you have a 3.5 GPA and score above a 30 on the MCAT. So obviously this is the old MCAT when it was up to like 45 points. There's no reason why you should not get into one medical school was his advice for that. And that's, oh my goodness, I started med school in 2013 or so. So you see that, and then think about if you're a parent or an aunt or an uncle or somebody, you started med school even way before that. So a lot has even just changed from then. And so you just got to know, like, okay, you really want to have somebody who is in the trenches with you and knows what's happening to help you be successful on this journey or whatever, because you work so hard. I feel for that kid, Jason, for thinking that, oh, you have family members, yeah, and all of that, but you put all that time and effort, and now there's a whole year out of your life that you can't get back because you wanted to, I'm not going to say like take shortcuts, but you didn't want to invest in yourself to have that future that you wanted. And now you have to go through this entire process all over again and just basically have like a red flag on your application because you're gonna have to ask, okay, why you're reapplying to medical school, and med schools are gonna know you're reapplying. So admissions committees went through the first time and saw that you couldn't make the cut. So hopefully you did something significantly to improve your application and fix whatever deficiency that you had so that you can be successful. And so that's what Jason would have to do on his reapplication to medical school if he was going to go down that route again and really know like there was something wrong and get that fixed so it doesn't happen a second time when you're applying to medical school. But then going back to Victoria, then she had these red flags, all of that, and she worked with me. I told her how we're going to coach her through everything, and luckily enough that, no, not luck, but she worked hard. She did what she needed to do. We really worked hard on like her personal statement, and we don't make excuses of what I say. We acknowledge our faults and then we say what we learned from them. And so that was very beneficial. And then I coached her for her medical school interviews, and then subsequently she was able to get into medical school even with being kicked out of school for academic dishonesty for years. She was able to get into medical school and now is thriving, doing really well and everything, and on the path to becoming a doctor. And so that can happen with you. But the thing is, there's, as I said, to tell between two medical students, people took different routes. One person, Jason, he decided, I'm going to figure it out on my own. He was basically, yeah, there's Mac classes, a GPS. I'm not going to do that. I'll just ask for directions along the way, and somebody, random stranger, somebody will help me and guide me to where I need to be. And obviously, it took a lot longer. There was detours and missteps along the way where you have other people like Victoria using technology. She was like, no, I'm going to use this GPS. I'm going to follow it. I got everything planned out. I know there's going to be some things I need to get feel, being that we need to figure out how we're going to fix this thing about being kicked out of school for academic dishonesty. But she followed the path and worked with me, and now was able to successfully get into medical school. And so you guys need to think about your future. What did you do currently as a pre-med? How much time and effort did you put into this process, into this journey to become a doctor, to get into medical school? And now, when that finish line, you're getting close to that destination, this is not the time to slack off, take shortcuts, figure it out on my own. I'll do things how I want to do them, because it doesn't work out. That just doesn't happen for people when they want to get into medical school, because it's extremely competitive. It's one of the most competitive fields to get into. And I'll tell you another story. There's another student who was dead set on going to one of the top tier medical schools in the country. And that's really what they wanted to do. They worked very hard. They scored in the 90th percentile on their MCAT. And they were just dead set on going to one of these top schools. And they reached out to me, told me about the background or whatever, and they decide, no, I feel now that I have this MCAT score, there's really nothing that I need help with in this process. And I said, okay, good luck to you. There's a lot that still goes on that, because you got to realize there's a lot of other people who have strong MCAT scores and GPAs who want to get into these top schools, and they're going to be working just as hard, if not harder, to get in. They said, no, I feel comfortable with that. I'm going to do it on my own. And then, unfortunately, again, they did not get into that school, and they're waiting to hear back from other schools as well with this process of getting into medical school to be a doctor. And yes, you could look like an all-star on paper, but if there's something with your personal statement or your secondaries or how you interview that just doesn't come across as a genuine and a well-rounded applicant for medical school, you're not going to have success. And students don't realize that. There's a lot, like each step in this application process means something to a medical school, and there's a reason why they're asking you to go through these hoops and hurdles to get there, because they look at it and see how you perform, not only as yourself, but how do you perform compared to your peers. And if you're not up to standards, they're going to pass on you and say, you know what, we have way more applicants than we can possibly accept, so we're not going to worry about that. And I tell students, like, some of these schools, they get 8,000, 10,000, even up to like 15,000 applications for medical school class, that I'm going to just be generous and say there's 200 students. So you guys can easily do the math and see, like, the odds just aren't in your favor. And I tell students all the time that when you're pre-med and you're applying to medical school, these AdComs and medical school admissions officers, they're looking for reasons to say no to you. Because if you have 12,000 people and you can only interview about 1,000 people, that's 11,000 people that right off the bat aren't going to even move or progress to the next stage of getting into medical school for that particular institution. So that's just what you guys need to know about that process. I wanted to share that with you. I wanted more than just a tale of two medical school applicants, but you guys can see the disparity in end result of reaching that final destination of being in medical school and on your way to becoming a doctor really is about what type of choices are you making now in your life, and what type of investments do you want to make in yourself and in your future, so that one day you can have that white coat and stethoscope. So if you're somebody who's on the fence and you're thinking, I'm not sure, maybe I want to figure it out on your own, I really, really would not advise you doing that. Reach out to me, Dr. Spears. You can find me at drpremed.com. We can talk about your situation, your background, and see maybe you would be a good fit for one of my programs. I can advise and coach you so that you can end up where you're meant to be, and not in this process of, oh, I didn't get in, or the top school that I wanted to get into rejected me, so now I have to settle for something else and just have to live with that for the rest of your life. You don't want that to happen. So do what you need to do what you ought, and make it happen so that you can be thriving as a medical student, knowing that you're in the best place for yourself and you did everything possible to ensure that you're going to get in and be a doctor. Thank you.